Very good evening to you. You're watching Face the Nation this evening. Tonight, we are going to draw your attention to a rather controversial topic that has been picked up by the mainstream media, the social media, the print and electronic media alike. The garbage containers at the CICT in Colombo Port and in the Katunayaka Free Trade Zone. We are going to talk to four eminent panelists who have come here to our studio today, and we are going to open the floor for questions as well from our journalists. Let me introduce the panel this evening to you. We have Mr. Jagat Gunawardana, attorney at law, an environmentalist as well. Mr. Ashraf Samsudeen, superintendent of the Sri Lanka Customs, joining us. And Mr. Eranda Ginige, social entrepreneur, also joining us this evening. And Mr. Nalaka Jayavira, who is a civil activist and who has been very vocal about the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement as well. And to raise questions from the journalists, we have Mr. Charlene Benedict joining us and Ms. Azra Hassan joining us, Assistant Manager of English News. Azra is joining us for the first time on the Face the Nation program. So without further ado, let's get to the topic right away. But before I start the session this evening, I have to remind to our viewers that we have also invited a member from Haley's to join us today. And we extended an invitation to Haley's, and a director responded saying, we write this email to you to invite a representative of your company to join as a panelist. And they responded by saying that since there's a court case going on, they would not be willing to participate in this particular debate this evening on our Face the Nation show. That being said, let's start off by talking to Mr. Ashraf Samsudeen, who is the superintendent of Sri Lanka Customs. So now, everyone knows the story behind the containers that were found at the CICT and then later also found at the free trade zone in Katunayaka as well. But people really don't know how the customs initially went and found this out. There were several media reports. There were foreign media reports also that said that there could be possible mortuary or morgue waste inside these containers. That was reported by several international prominent media outlets. But people would like to know from your perspective, as you are now joining us as the superintendent of customs, how the customs initially spotted this and how you decided to move forward from there.
Well, in the month of May, one of our officers was trained in South Korea under World Customs Organization Regional Intelligence License Office, which is located in Korea. They studied certain transactions over cross-border, and they identify a number of Western countries are dumping their garbage and the waste material in Asian countries, especially the South Asian and Southeast Asian. So what they thought was to do an operation fighting against this waste dumping in these Asian countries. So they started an operation called Operation Green Earth. Under this operation, the officer was trained and he came to Sri Lanka after the training, and we did a survey on import and export. Then we found some containers which are not cleared from the port area. So we focused on that, and we did a preliminary investigation, and it reveals these containers are imported into Sri Lanka for an UB operation, and the goods are saying used mattress. And we studied that one, and we came to know that we don't have a capacity or any mechanism in Sri Lanka to take a recovery process from this waste. So we detained the containers, 111 containers inside the harbour, and we examined the container with the initial importer, and we found all our waste, the municipal and household waste of United Kingdom. So we further our investigation revealed these goods are to be moved to a hub in Katunayaka under hub operation, and they will make some little bit minor processing and they will re-export that one. But when we visited there, we found there are no such a mechanism, and huge quantity of waste materials are dumping in the yard. From that, we started the investigation, and we found this particular incident. And we studied some of the agreement and the Basel Convention and the BOI agreement and relevant acts, and we came to know that under any law, this cannot be imported to Sri Lanka. These are banned items. So we need to go for an investigation and we need to face the customs inquiry. Then we will come to a conclusion what to do with stuff. Until that, as the court matter is legal litigation is there, we are not in a position to give the details of the investigation. After the custom inquiry, we will inform you what we are going to do with these waste materials and who are the parties involved and who should be penalized.
Mr. Samsudin, thank you very much. Very quickly, let me move on to Mr. Jayavira as well now. Mr. Jayavira, a very important point has been raised throughout this process of information coming out with regard to the garbage containers. Initially, when you also were seen on media speaking about the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, you spoke about it and said garbage will be imported into the country. The story right now, very well explained by the Superintendent of Customs, is that in fact garbage had been brought down into the country, but not under any agreement. This has been done under the guise of a commercial operation. And now the situation seems like what you said back in the day has indirectly taken place already. Mr. Jayavira, what is your view on this?
Yeah, let me thank for inviting me for this discussion. Yes, this is the question. Now, let me start from the Central Environment Authority website. It says the last update is 2nd August 2013. It says the approval procedure for importation of hazardous waste. It says, as Sri Lanka does not have disposal facilities for importation of list A waste material of Basel Convention is not allowed. Thereby, they say that importation of list B waste of Basel Convention is proposal subject to the Central Environment Authority and BUIE approval. Now, the question here is, when you read this, it is implied to say that we have facilities to dispose or recycle the list P items of the Basel Convention, and we do not have facilities to dispose or to recycle the list A items. Now, when the Central Environment says like this to the whole world, when we said that don't open the garbage under the Singapore Agreement, if you can remember, so-called experts and economists said that the garbage has been listed. Though it is been listed, it cannot never be imported. Now, the question here is, when the so-called expert says it cannot be done, the Central Environment Authority officially accepts it can be done. Whether this garbage came through the Central Environment Authority or the BOI, as it says, approval, we do not know. That is up to investigation to be done and decided. Yes. The other question here is, if it is possible, then implementing Singapore Agreement, SLSFTA, will be create a huge problem in this country. As at now, because this is a commercial operation, yes, the country can take decisions back. Country even can repeal the Central Environment Authority gazettes and say, no, this is the procedure adopted, thereby we will rectify the whole procedure that is there in the country. But if not, if it is imported under the Singapore Agreement, there is no way that we can stop this, because then other party can ask for huge damages, compensations. It has been signed under the context that as per the regulations. If I quote the Singapore Agreement clearly specify you can import garbage, manage garbage as per the Central Environment Authority approval procedure. Now, the Central Environment procedure is there. Now, where do we stand? Now, government from one side says, the experts, you cannot import. Central Environment says can. The Singapore Agreement says, yes, you can import subject to the Central Environment Authority. What our position is, gosh, we should stop this business forever. That can be done because still it is under the sovereignty of this country.
Thank you, Mr. Jayavira. I want to again move on to Mr. Eranda Ginige, who is a social entrepreneur, a person who follows what is going on in the world when it comes to new trends in entrepreneurship. And Mr. Ginige, you would agree with me if I say that around the world, especially Western countries moving garbage to developing countries is considered an issue as we speak at this moment. And we've seen China saying we don't want garbage from USA and sending it back. We've seen it happening in the Philippines, Cambodia. All these countries are taking a stand on it. What should be mentioned is on news we have seen that the customs also has taken a strong stand and said that Sri Lanka is not a garbage dump. That sentiment has been issued. Now, my question to you is, Mr. Ginige, the world over, we are seeing a trend where garbage is turned back to the Western countries. Now, here we see a situation where garbage is here. The customs, according to a program that they are carrying out, identifies that there is an issue. They launch several investigations, several people file cases. However, the involvement of the stakeholders seem to be a bit on the silent side. Comparing our situation to international situations, where do we stand?
Yeah, and as Jayavira mentioned, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me. But more than that, let me thank your organization, your channels and Newsfirst for really making a big news about this and a big noise about this, because I think that's the need of the hour. So well done for that. Now, as you very correctly said, Chaturanga, this what we see is this global north, as we call it, the developed nations or states. Found out that because they started having these regulations of waste management during the 70s and 80s, it was very expensive for them. So they found that the convenient way is to pay some money and offload it, dump it in the global south, which is the developing world, right? So that's what's been happening. And then came these conventions, Basel and Rotterdam and Stockholm, and there are a number of conventions, and I think these experts will speak more about that. But as you very correctly said, now I see now, first of all, we see Haley's free zone, as part of the conglomerate Haley's, which is considered as a respectable corporate citizen and who has a long-standing history of doing business in Sri Lanka. Seems they've had I saw their press conference and I read their press releases. Seem like they are saying this is not our responsibility, right? But we also on news that there are some 50,000 square feet loads of waste on their premises. Now they can't just say that this is not our responsibility. First of all, as a responsible corporate citizen, they must accept the fault, and because it is exposed to air, I can talk about the harm that it can cause later, but obviously it is a major problem, both environmental and human health problem. So therefore they have to take the responsibility and say that and take appropriate measures. Secondly, as you correctly mentioned, the government authorities, the relevant ministries particularly, are not owning up to this, and they have to make a strong stand as the customs did, and make sure that Sri Lanka is not seen as a dumping ground. And the biggest worry is now, because I work in the sustainability space, this recycling is very close to me.
Absolutely.
But as a last thing in this section, what I want to say is that we need to look at this crisis holistically and make sure that we have right policies and a system to manage this in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Ginige. Let me now draw your attention to Mr. Jagat Gunawardana, who is an attorney at law. Sir, a lot of important legal points are being raised with regard to this particular issue. But I want to question, before we move on to our journalists, I want to question another specific angle with regard to the garbage that was found. Now, again, let me draw from Mr. Ginige and come to you. Internationally, when things like this happen, when, let's say, USA sends garbage to a different country and they find out that there is an issue there, there are several environmental concerns as well. We do not know what is in this container, first of all, until an investigation is being carried out by the customs, by the Central Environmental Authority and other related parties. When it comes to this particular incident, this current status we are in, making this available or opening this, shouldn't the people who also go and check this wear some safety gear or be careful about themselves? Because We do not know at the moment. Right now as we speak, we are only solely depending on the information that is provided to us by the customs. They have been very fast in providing the information to the media so the general public are aware that there is garbage or waste material in this. However, as I mentioned in my opening statement, there are press releases and media reports to say that there could be human waste here, that there is hazardous waste in these containers, that there is clinical waste in these containers. So a lot of information coming out, and we as journalists want to clear this to the general public. When a container like this is open to the public, or when the customs department is inspecting it, isn't there a risk to them as well? And isn't there a risk to our whole country when this is being exposed?
Yes, there are several risks. The first is the risk that is incurred by the people who open the containers and inspect the garbage. They should wear safety gear, and there are safety procedures in handling material that you don't really know what it is all about. And there are sampling techniques and sampling procedures which also incorporate safety measures in taking samples. So that is the first line of defense that the people who are handling it has to take. And the first and foremost thing is a face mask to protect their nasal cavities and the lungs from any contaminated material that they may inhale. So that's one thing that you can see in the screen, but there are other safety measures, and also there are certain issues. If there is a possibility of radioactive material, they have to wear a special suit as a safety procedure. So there are safety procedures which are not in the law really, but are given to all the government authorities, including the customs, who inspect these things. So preliminary investigation may not really show what it is, so they have to take samples and do a more detailed investigation with the help of the government analyst and other relevant authorities. Let me come back to a very salient point that we need to mention. Now this garbage or whatever it is had come from Great Britain, and Sri Lanka and Britain are both parties to the Basel Convention on Waste. And here I should first of all point my finger towards Britain for violating the provisions of the Basel Agreement, where they cannot let this to come to Sri Lanka. So they had violated their own obligations under the Basel Convention. If I may read the statement, this is the statement. Article 4 says, parties shall prohibit or shall not permit the export of hazardous waste and other waste. So even if it is not a hazardous waste, other waste is a thing that covers everything. If the state of import does not consent in writing to the specific import in the case where that state of import has not prohibited the import of such wastes. So even if we have not prohibited, we have to give a consent. So that is the starting point that I make my case, where Britain has blatantly violated their own obligations under the Basel Convention and let this to come to Sri Lanka. Now after it has come to us and we are caught up in the whole situation, saying that this may contain this or that is not the answer. They should have checked it then and there, and this shows how irresponsible they are. On the other hand, as Mr. Ginige very correctly pointed out, and as Mr. Jaivir also pointed out before me, there is a tendency for developed countries to dump their waste material, including hazardous waste, in unsuspecting and gullible third world countries.
You can conclude, sir.
Yeah. Then the other thing is, as Mr. Ashraf said, I also emphasize the fact that no Sri Lankan law at present allows any importation of any waste material. Although the CEA website says so, the website is in contradiction to the National Environment Act. So therefore, we have to all abide by the law. Even if the website is wrong, it does not mean that anyone can get an authority to import any garbage or waste material to this country, and the National Environment Act does not have any provision to allow any import of a waste material to this country. Therefore, if someone makes that interpretation, I should say it's bad in law or it is illegal, and that interpretation does not carry any weight. So if someone is importing it, even with the permission from a government authority, I should say that is bad in law, or it is illegal in the day-to-day terminology of the people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunawardena, and thank you very much to our panelists for that opening session. I'm going to open the floor for journalist questions, but before that, let me also remind to our panel and our viewers that there is an action pending in court with regard to the matter, and we ask our guests to ensure and maintain accuracy in their statements. We urge them to take full responsibility to the statements they make throughout the program, and we as a channel will not take responsibility if there is an inaccuracy. That is my duty to remind you. I know that you all are aware of this. As a duty, let me remind this to you. So once again, Shalan Azra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chaturanga. I'd like to direct my first question to Mr. Shamsuddin. You said there is an ongoing court case, and be reminded of that as well, and that you do not want to comment on the parties involved. Now, there are 3 companies that have been named, and they have come out, they have held press briefings and tried to explain the situation. But I'd like to question you on what are the parties on the side of the state that are involved in this. You get customs officials have come here. Yes, we see them. What are the other institutions like the BOI who are also involved in this or who have a stake in this as well, as they are the owners of the land in the free trade zone? Then institutions like the Central Environmental Authority. How has the cooperation been with the customs in bringing this situation to a close?
Let us assume a particular company wants to do a recycling process in Sri Lanka. So the material should come from a foreign country, and there should be an importer. So the importer needs to make some process. So through another mediator is giving that stuff to a third party to do a process. That process is done under BOI Act, Board of Investment Act.
Right.
So that particular area is called hub.
Right.
Hub operation, which is exempted from certain laws in this country. One, Custom Ordinance, Import and Export Control Act, and the Exchange Control Act. But if a company is registered under BOI, there should be an agreement between Board of Investment and that particular company. So that agreement says what are the process, what are the things they can do, what are the things prohibited. As far as our investigation, no company can import household and municipal waste into this country. That's the first rule. If a company or an industry is working in Sri Lanka, they should obtain approval from Ministry of Environment and the Central Environment Authority. So they are the state. And this, if it is a BOI company, they should get the BOI approval, and in the BOI there is an environmental unit, and they give the approval to them. Even in the agreement, there are a number of clauses. So that clauses
This is the agreement between the operator of the free trade zone and the BOI.
Exactly. So that agreement says what can be done, what can be imported, what are exempted, and all these materials. So as far as I think, in any agreement, when they make, they always give priority to protect the environment and the society. But you know, in trade facilitation, most of the government, we know we need revenue, this revenue target. But in this particular scenario, we did a financial analysis and we identified there are no profit in this process.
Right.
For example, I'll tell you, a company imported number of containers, they process. They use 30, 40-foot containers to process and export the material. But they had exported only 16.5 volume of 40-foot containers. What happened to the 13.5 container load? That answer we have to find. Where are the cargo? So
This is out of the lot that has already been recycled, as they say, right?
as for they recycle and they say recovery process,
Right.
but they utilize 30, 40-foot containers. Okay, but they have exported only 16.5, 20 containers. What happened to the rest of the containers?
So now
That's
we
the
saw
problem.
these parties coming out and releasing statements. There were a number of press releases that were released, and we reported on it. We also saw correspondence between the BOI and the operator of the free trade zone. The BOI coming out and saying that we had asked the operator of the free trade zone to re-export these items as soon as possible. Were those taken into account during your investigation, and how far has it contributed?
I would like to reveal one more thing. This particular investigation was launched by Sri Lanka Customs after the operation of Green Earth. Why didn't they follow their instruction they given to that particular companies? Why they didn't bother about the cargo which are lying in our land? Apart from the law, apart from the conventions, apart from any other matters, we, the people and the citizens of Sri Lanka, what is our responsibility towards our motherland? Apart from everything, any law. So that has to be give priority in the future.
Mr. Samsudeen, I would like to, in your opening remarks, you mentioned about how these, even the companies, the three companies, when they came out and they were openly speaking about the issue, they mainly spoke about reprocessing this. And you, in your opening remark, you said that we don't have a mechanism in the country to reprocess. Am I right?
Exactly.
Right. So, in that case, if we don't have a mechanism of reprocessing in the country, what would you tell me the other options are, other than reprocessing? Other options that we can do when we bring things to the country?
No. My point is, they declared this item as used mattress. But the cargo is not used mattress. We consider it as waste, municipal and household waste. What can we do with the waste?
But I think I can make if I may, Mr. Samsudeen, because of my sort of sustainability and social enterprise knowledge in this area, I think I can give an answer to your question. So what happens is, they're saying that this waste is actually used mattresses, right? Used in the hospitals, right? And majority of it looks like mattresses, and also rugs and carpets kind of stuff, right? So how they can be repurposed or recycled is that anywhere in the world, what they do is you have to manually disassemble them, right? You have to break them apart. You have to take the foam out. You have to take the wooden pieces out. You have to take the cotton out, the fabric out, and the iron out. You have to separate them manually, right?
So there's no machinery for this.
I mean, there can be machines that you use at certain points, like to break it and break it apart and so on. But a lot of it is manual labor, right? And that is actually why they send such material to countries where the labor is cheap, right? So they send and actually, Chaturanga, Azra, you don't need huge workforce to do this also. I mean, one mattress can be disassembled by a few people, right? So giving jobs is also not a huge opportunity here. But as Mr. Samsudeen very correctly said, and I would like to sort of stress on this, is that anywhere in the world when they do this operation, now once they separate these, they have to sell it back to somebody who's going to buy it. So somebody will buy the steel, somebody will buy the cotton, somebody will buy the fabric for various other, to make various other stuff. But the thing is, it is very difficult to find a market for these kind of stuff.
Mr.
As a result of that,
let's say that they do this, okay, let's say that they take the metal and keep it here, they take, let's say the wool and cotton and keep it there, okay? So then even if you re-export it, we will be left with a certain amount of
that is one thing.
We can't re-export.
That is one thing. No, what I was going to say is that it is still difficult to find a market, buyers for this. Therefore, it is actually a loss-making operation. So therefore, a lot of these recyclers actually charge a separate fee. So Haley's, as a responsible corporate citizen, needs to come out and very openly tell us what is their method, what are they doing.
Shall I say my comment?
Yes, please, Mr.
The letter dated 24th May 2018 addressed to the Colombo Customs, the terminal operation, the Ceylon Metal Processing Corporation Private Limited says that for the delay of more than months, 1 year, is purely because their machineries broke down and they need to import the machine parts and everything from Germany, and thereby just to bear with them until the machineries are in order. So Mr. Eranda's position of using labor has been denied by the
company itself.
This is nothing to do with recycling. This is simply garbage. What is happening here is, when you get the container from the Europe, you are paid with minimum $20,000 to $30,000. You bring it here, just for the sake of BOI purposes, export certain few items back to some other part of the world, and use the same BOI dumping yard and dump in Sri Lanka, the balancer. So I don't think there's any intention of recycling. There's nothing called recycling. It's now, if you go to this company website, they are saying they are doing reusing and bringing new materials from the old material, all sorts of stuff are saying. And it goes up to the extent that they are importing all the scrap. Now Mr. Gunawardena says it is prohibited. And their factory is well within another BOI FTZ zone in Vennapur. Now, where do we stand? Mr. Gunawardena, if Mr. Gunawardena says it's the law of the country, how can BOI allow another company to import scrap iron and reproduce?
Mr. Gunawardena, what are your views on this? You brought up a point, and Mr. Javed is also bringing in a point. I want to clarify this to our viewers. What is your view?
My view is that if the BOI has allowed this, they have exceeded their powers, and therefore it is illegal. Although it is a matter before the court, the circumstances and the facts pertaining to it very clearly shows that they should have looked into the material that is brought into this country, and it is now very clear that it is something that they cannot exercise as their own powers. Even if the hub operation is given to them, they have to abide by the laws of this country. And the Supreme Court had very correctly said, when the GCEC Amendment Act came, which created the BOI, that they have to abide by the existing laws of this country, and they are not doing away with the existing provisions of the existing legislation. Therefore, I agree with it that what has happened is something that is beyond the law or illegal, in other words.
Mr. Gunawardena, you're an environmentalist as well, and you follow cases pertaining to, and you have also worked in hand in hand with the Customs Department as well. I want to ask a question like this. Now, all three of our panelists, including the Customs Department, says very clearly that there is garbage here. Who should make that announcement before the general public? Is it the Customs that should come forward and say, there was garbage here, and these are the types of garbage that was found, this is hazardous, this is clinical, and this is something else? Or is it the Central Environmental Authority, or is it the BOI? Who should come forward before the public can make this announcement?
Well, if the items had been brought without giving due notification about the contents, that is tantamount to a false declaration under the Customs Ordinance. It's very clearly stated in section 119 of the Customs Ordinance, correct me if I am wrong, that you have to correctly declare the item that you are bringing. So if there is a false declaration, of course Customs can take action in accordance.
So let me interject there and raise that question to you.
What you told was very correct. Sri Lanka Customs Department is a law enforcement unit of the Sri Lankan government in border control. So in any matters, we need to get the expert opinions from the relevant authority. For example, if it is a plant materials or anything, we'll go for the plant quarantine. If it is animal, we'll go for the animal quarantine.
Yes.
So we have some expert in this country. In this scenario, and Central Environment Authority is the expert who can give us the good opinion.
Yes.
We did that one. In our preliminary investigation, we brought the Central Environment Authority representative and we opened the container. We didn't examine the container. Okay, I'm very correctly saying, we opened the container, just door open with mask and other materials. So they also identified, and we got the expert opinion from them, Central Environment Authority, saying us post-consumer waste cannot be imported into this country, and that is prohibited. We have that expert opinion from Central Environment Authority.
So in this particular point, the customs declaration, the CUSDEC initially says that there were mattresses. However, when you declare it open, has there been a violation of what has been declared and not? Or what was declared is in the containers? Very simple question.
That is the controversial. In
I think
hub operation, they don't declare that to the customs. It goes to the BOI.
So that
So
question
we did
should
our
be raised on the
investigation
BOI.
with the shipping documents, manifest and other relevant materials. In the manifest, they declared it as mattress, and somewhere they meant as felt.
Felt.
But when we opened the container, we found it is waste.
Chaturang, if I may
Yes.
just intervene there for 1 minute. I'd like to ask this question from Mr. Shamsuddin. Now, we know that there are certain containers inside the port, and we know that there are certain containers that were moved to the free trade zone. What is the power that the customs exercise over these two sets of containers? Does the location of the container restrict the customs officials from inspecting it or acting on behalf of it? Because the containers that are already at the FTZ have been cleared from the Ports Authority through customs. How does the legal proceedings on that work?
Yeah. So in any agreement, in the BOI agreement, as well the hub operation special government gazette notification, it says if any materials are prohibition and restriction, customs can interfere into that one.
Despite of the location
Yes.
and despite of the goods having already been cleared from the customs.
Exactly. So still we have the power under that gazette notification, we have that power. Also the BOI agreement, there is a clause that if any violations are taking place, then customs law will come into operation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have to, with that, cross into a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll have more questions from the journalists to our panelists. Stay with us. You're watching Face Nation, and we are discussing the controversial garbage containers that were found in Colombo and Katunayaka. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We are discussing with four eminent panelists regarding the waste containers that were found in the Colombo port and in the Katunayaka Free Trade Zone. Before we left off into the break, several interesting points were raised with regard to the legal background of this current issue, with regard to how it was found out, specifically by a superintendent of Sri Lanka Customs. We have Mr. Ginige also and Mr. Nalaka Jayavira explaining to us the international aspect, also with regard to these waste containers. Mr. Ginige, I want to start off the third round, I beg your pardon, the third round, also with journalist questions coming in. Now, I'm just, while we were talking, I just put the words Sri Lanka waste into Google and did a search. And apart from several local media outlets, almost everything that comes after the third search is international. You are a person who speaks of our country in international forums. You are a person who tries to get out the social entrepreneurship. The image of Sri Lanka is important, isn't it, for all that to happen, for us to develop, for the country to develop, for individuals to develop. Now what happens to our image when things like this happen, when we give out to the world an idea that we as Sri Lanka are willing to accept someone else's waste or garbage and then not do anything about it. Stakeholders remain silent, ministers remain silent. What is the image that we are trying to portray? What are we doing here?
Very bad, very bad. I mean, unacceptable, right? I mean, we already have a waste garbage crisis in our hands with our domestic waste, right? We saw, people have died, financial assets have been lost. And all around our coasts, we have a huge plastic problem. Our oceans are, grossly polluted with plastic. So we already have a huge problem of waste. And on top of that, if we are actually, importing waste like this, and by the way, all thanks to customs, Sri Lanka Customs for finding this out, but I would suspect that there had been and there is currently more waste coming into the country.
There could be.
There could be, right, because that is a big concern, because even with the Basel Convention, there's a lot of criticism against Basel Convention, because we are, through various means, waste is smuggled. Waste is smuggled into developing countries, right? And mind you, this actually throws in an interesting point. Now, Sri Lanka is one of the top 10 plastic polluters in the world, right? And we always think, how the hell are we such a big polluter being a small country, and we have been questioning this statistic also. Now that this kind of revelations are coming, maybe, who knows, maybe this is plastic that is coming from the developing countries, which are dumped to our landfill and to our oceans, who knows. So these are serious things, that these are new revelations that we have to investigate now. So anyway, my point is, earlier as I was telling Jayavir, I was telling that, yes, this does not look like a recycling operation. Because I am particularly mentioning this, the way that Haley's company has stored this waste material. It is open to air, open to the elements, rain drops on it, it's moldy, liquids are seeping out, it's entering in, through the gutters into our streams and rivers and our water bodies and into our soil. Now, any proper recycler or processor or whoever needs to have proper storage facilities as the minimum to start an operation like this. So the BOI is also responsible, I think, in order to make sure that these BOI approved companies have these limited facilities, and the company itself has done a really bad job. So I'm sad to say, Haley's cannot get away so easily and say this is somebody else's business.
Mr.
They must come out.
I think I have to interject there and mention, I think our viewers would find it unfair that Haley's representation is not in this table. But let me remind to our viewers that we had invited Haley's to take part in tonight's debate with regard to the waste containers. Their reply to us said, "Thank you for your invitation to participate in your talk show Face the Nation. However, since the matter is now pending in the Court of Appeal and we will be setting out our position therein, we are of the view that this is not an opportune time to participate in the Face the Nation program." This was the reply of Haley's. We have invited Haley's to also be a part of this program this evening. Thank you.
But irrespective of whether there is a court case or not, there is something called business ethics, right? There's corporate social responsibility. There's corporate sustainability, right? These are standards that any corporate citizen has to live up to. So that is separate. But they must own this. They should apologize for the at least for the way that they have stored the waste in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Ginige. Floor is open for questions.
Mr. Jayavira, now three companies it was revealed that three companies were involved in the whole transaction through various documents. Then the ETL, then the Ceylon Metal Processing Corporation and the Haley's Free Trade Zone. But none of these companies are coming forward to say that it is our fault or if it is our mistake or what is the explanation. Or what they say is it is not our responsibility. Now, people of this country don't understand the hub acts and the gazette notifications that we talk about. All what they say is the garbage dump in the country. We saw in footage, we saw in pictures how there are worms, then what you call the glass shrapnel, so many things. People only say that, and they see and they worry that Sri Lanka will eventually end up being a garbage dump to other foreign nations. So, can these responsible companies just pass the buck to one another? Why can't someone come forward and say, yes, we'll re-export it back to, or we'll face what are the legal action that will be taken against us?
As I told you, if it is $20,000 per container, you calculate how much of money they have got. Now, are you going to pay them to resend it plus the shipping cost, and how they are going to do it? There's no way. And I have a doubt why the Aruwakkaru is being quickly transformed into a dumping yard in the recent past. Whether Aruwakkaru operation is part and parcel of this operation is also, we don't know. They would have planned just to make sure you get the garbage in, produce some sort of a few items to the BOI to say that we are re-exporting and take the majority of the stuff to Aruwakkaru. This is where the Sri Lankan system doesn't work. As Mr. Gunawardena says, he says that Sri Lanka have no right to import or export. But let me quote the fact sheet of the Basel Convention in the Basel website. It says, a cabinet decision has been taken to prohibit importation of list A waste from all countries, as what I told in the central environmental position. It says to keep the list B waste as control list to take decisions on case-by-case basis. Further, it refers that the Sri Lanka has the right to export as well. Now, if this is the position, I mean, let me, even if I 100% agree with Mr. Gunawardena, but internationally what is said is completely on the opposite. Now, when you have this kind of legally two different views, contradictions, the officers might take this one because they are personally gained. And for your question, if now say that you are referring three companies. The first one is an operator, that is the shipping agent. I don't think he has nothing to do with this, he is getting the commission. The other one is that is Evergreen.
Yes.
The other one is the owning company and the other was the hub
Ceylon
operation.
Metal Processing.
Now the hub operation is a service provider. As Mr. Ginige said, can they get away from the position saying that we are not owning? You can't. But what is the answer left with them? They are trying to somehow make sure that Sri Lankan people will forget this issue down the line another 2 weeks' time, and we can just go and dump the thing in Aruwakkaru. Simple operation. This is exactly, I think, what they are trying to do.
It will become a habit then. Everyone will start
Obviously,
dumping
unless now the government take firm decisions on this matter. As Mr. Gunawardena says, if importation and exportation is prohibited in terms of waste, then we should stop all the companies under the BOI who are involved in this kind of stuff. Unless we take strong decisions, this will take place.
Mr. Gunawardena, your views with regard to the Basel Convention and what was said by Mr. Jayavira?
First of all, I should say, if there is a cabinet decision, it does not carry any weight in law, because a cabinet decision is not law. It's only a policy decision taken, and a policy decision has to be taken in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and other written laws of this country. Yeah. Let me point out one salient factor in the Constitution, Article 27, Sub-Article 14, under the Directive Principles of State Policy, which says that the state shall protect, conserve and promote the environment for the sake of the community. So, whatever the decision that the cabinet says cannot override the directive principles of state policy enshrined in the Constitution. And the other thing is, whatever the cabinet decision has to be translated into a written law that is operative in the country, either through an amendment to an act, either through a new act, or through a regulation if the act already has some provisions for it. Now, as I explained previously, no law in Sri Lanka allows the importation of waste material to this country. The National Environment Act does not have a provision to let anyone import waste material into this country. Of course, there is a scheduled waste handling license issued under Section 23A of the National Environment Act. If you look at Section 23A, it is only for the domestic discharge and the controlling of waste material into the environment. It is nothing to do with imports, and therefore the Environment Act does not have any provisions to allow anyone to import any waste material to this country. Now, coming back to the BOI, let me clarify three things. The first of all, as I mentioned before, the BOI does not have overriding powers over other legislation. The Hub Operation Gazette, to me, that is the 2013 Gazette, is again bad in law, because what has been passed by a parliament is the law of this country, and the parliament has the sovereignty in their hands according to Article 3 and 4 of the Constitution. The ministers cannot, by regulation, override an act of parliament. So the mere fact that this hub operation gazette says that the customs ordinance and the Import and Export Control Act does not operate in hub operation areas is bad in law, because it goes against the spirit of the law in the country. So whoever the minister at that time or this time, whoever is issuing a gazette regulation has to see that it is in accordance with the provisions of the constitution. It does not go beyond the powers that is fettered to a minister to issue regulations. So the only provision that the minister can have to override the existing law is under the emergency regulation that we all know under the National Security Act, that has to be approved by the parliament within a period of 30 days. So in an emergency, the minister in charge of national security can do it, but then it is again scrutinized by the parliament and ratified or approved by the parliament within a period of 30 days. Now coming back to the BUI, let me move into the hub operation ground where a lot of waste had been detected, openly exported to the air. Now if there had been a processing operation, the Board of Investment should have issued what we call an environmental protection license. And according to section 20A of the GCEC Amendment Act, that is the BUI Act as we usually refer to it, the BUI has the right to issue an environmental protection license, but it has to be with the concurrence of the Central Environmental Authority. They cannot do it on their own without consulting the CEA and getting their concurrent approval. So that approval is concurrent. They can't issue if the CEA opposes it. The fact is, to my knowledge, that this had not been done. There is no environmental protection license issued to this hub operation in Katunayaka. I take responsibility for this statement because we verified the facts this morning. So the second point is, if the dump is open to the elements, as we all saw in the media, there is always a problem of rainwater falling into it and reacting with the material and forming organic liquid, what we call leachate. And the leachate is a highly polluting liquid when it enters a water body. So in that particular instance, it is offence under section 23H of the National Environment Act, section 27 of the Fisheries and Aquatic Resources Act, and under several other acts which I don't want to mention, but suffice to mention at least 2 acts where it is an offence which could be liable to a court action. The other issue is they have just dumped it on the soil and the soil is getting contaminated. Contaminating the soil is an offence under section 23N of the National Environment Act. So the BUI has acted irresponsibly as far as I am concerned, because they have allowed a party to pollute the soil and allow the pollution of the water by allowing an open dumping of waste material in an exposed environment. So they have to bear the responsibility of not issuing an APL and not taking legal action for the open dumping of waste material, and also not allowing the CEA to inspect and take necessary action, because as we all know, the BUI has exclusive authority over these zones. So they have to invite the other government bodies, and as the BUI Act itself says, that they get only the concurrence of the Central Environmental Authority. So this is a good opportunity to see that such overriding powers given to certain government officers or certain government bodies and departments should be checked and balanced with provisions in other spheres. So let me take this as an opportunity to say some of the overriding powers that had been given to some of the investment promotion organizations with the mistaken belief that they will be acting in the best interest of the country has to be relooked and reconsidered, and if not, we have to take decisions about amending the existing laws and either giving more powers to the regulators or reducing the powers that have been fettered to these organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Gunawardena, for that comprehensive understanding of the situation. With that, I want to come to Mr. Jayavira, with time very quickly running out. Now, Mr. Gunawardena mentioned here about 2 key institutions, the CEA and the BOI. Now, Mr. Jayavira, as a citizen of this country, I want to ask you this question and I want your honest opinion. In the CEA, when this particular incident took place, the chairman of the CEA was one person. His son was in the board of one of the companies that is involved in this incident. Currently, the BOI is under Minister Malik Samaravikrama, a close relative of Minister Malik Samaravikrama, was also a director of the said company. So, could this be a reason as to why the CEA and the BOI very specifically are not very open? In fact, we invited the CEA to be here this evening as well. However, up until now, we have not received a clear response as to whether they are attending as well. So, this is why I am asking you, the political hand, has it played a role?
Obviously, in this country, there's no ethics or morals in this country. The politicians and the bureaucrats, if you consider, conflict of interest is the master game plan. Your son is there, the daughter, son-in-law, and all the relatives are in the different boats. And they are playing, I would say, a gang kind of operation.
Collusion.
Yes. And even, I don't know the relationship between the directors and the ministers and the chairmen, but I would agree that yes, that is part of this Sri Lankan culture, the official culture. And if I go to extent, you know that the banana republic theory and the concept and philosophy, I think Sri Lanka is fastly moving towards another banana republic. I don't know whether this should be named as a garbage republic or something else, but we are much more getting close to a banana republic. Now, this is what I said. Internationally, we are committing something else. Mr. Gunawardena says legally something else. But the cabinet takes, as Mr. Gunawardena said, completely different. Now, where do we stand, public? How are we going to accept the position of the government? Now, if the government says directly one single story, then everybody knows what it's going to say. Now, if the 2013 Gazette is wrong, as Mr. Gunawardena said, yes, but it has, I think it has gone through the parliament. What are the parliaments that have done? I think none of them has even read it. They have just said, okay, go ahead, do it, that's all. And now the time has lapsed. No one can go to Supreme Court against the 2013 Gazette. But some can argue, yes, because you have ignored, it is part of the law. Now, this is where we are going wrong. I think this is a good opportunity for us to sit down and bring the necessary discipline that is required to develop this country. Yes, there's a mistake. We don't need, yes, we can rectify that, but we should rectify not only this, all the things that can take place has to be eliminated. For that, we need to sit down and work.
Mr. Jaivir, now at a time when the country is facing a real issue like this, what we see in the political arena, what's been discussed is about the presidential candidacy, who's going to be the next leader, who's going to run for the next provincial council election. Have these politicians got their priorities right? Are they actually thinking about what's best for the country, or is it for themselves?
Also, there is a presidential candidate involvement in this whole story as well. We have to keep that in the back of our heads. Yes, but continue.
Sorry, I couldn't help it, Chaturanga, but this is what we hear every day when we do the news. We hear politicians going to places, doing this and that, still talking about presidential candidacy and then about the elections and things like that. Do they know what the people of this country want?
It's like this. All the business people, the norm is they pay all parties. I don't want to name.
Political parties.
All the political parties are paid by these people. So thereby, they have their own reservation. That's the way I'm looking at. Because even if you look at the Singapore agreement, we realize that certain parties never came for our support. Even after personally going and discussing with them and putting all the things in black and white paper and saying this is wrong, still no one came. This is a country that's why I said this is a law, going to a banana state, banana republic, and it's like a lawless country. And we should correct it if possible. Now take what Mr. Gunawardena said, the cabinet decision policies are not laws, agreed. But go and read the Basel Convention and all the other stuff. What they say is Sri Lanka has a waste management policy. And they are based on that. But that has never gone through the parliament. It is only up to the cabinet. Now, it is not a law, but they are referring it. Now, if forget about Sri Lankan. If I am an investor, want to come to this country from another country and want to study the position of Sri Lanka, if I study this one, I have a clear picture. Okay, list A is out, list B I can import and I can even export, and there's a national waste management policy. But when it comes to Sri Lanka, it's a completely different story. Now,
let me interrupt for a while. The national waste management policy also does not allow the importation of any waste matter to this country. So that is why I said that the government officials who are acting on a discretionary basis on an issue have to abide by a national policy, and the national policy also does not allow the importation.
Yeah, but Mr. Gunawardhan, I think I also have to agree with Mr. Jayavira on this, because now Mr. Jayavira from the start of the program have been coming out with facts and saying this has been mentioned in the CEA website, this has been mentioned in the Basel Convention website, and you continue to say no, this law is available and under this law we are prohibited from importing garbage and waste. But even if the law is there, someone along the line, somewhere, has completely ignored that and carried on with bringing in garbage and waste into the country. Now, at this moment, people are talking of sending it back, re-exporting. I think Azra also touched on this point. What is the legal premise, legal punishment that should be given to if someone has violated the law for that punishment? What is the legal, because Sri Lanka has lost out on a lot here. We have lost out on our reputation as a country, as a nation. We have lost out, possibly, we have lost out environmentally, the conditions around those areas as well. And we are talking about 100-odd containers. We are not just talking about 1 or 2 containers. We have to get that accurately into our minds and heads, because we are talking about a large quantity here, not just 1 or 2.
41 containers.
Yes, and the garbage, as you said, is lying somewhere in one of the companies in the free trade zone. Now, at this moment, right now, nothing has been done. There is obviously an inquiry from the customs, but that loss and the financial loss to the country and the reputation loss to the country, environmental loss to the country, no one has so far spoken about it, Mr. Gunawardhan.
Yeah, that is exactly the point that we are always trying to make as environmental people, that we have to bring the rule of law into this country, and when the rule of law is brought, only that the environment can be protected by the law. Otherwise, there will be always a way out for conniving parties to find some loophole in the law, and in this case there was no loophole, but they made use of another law to circumvent the obligations that are imposed on them by the laws. So this problem is there. That's why I mentioned previously the fact that if the facilitators are given more powers than the regulators, we have to amend that situation, and regulators should be given the overriding powers, because that is the accepted norm throughout the world, that the regulatory law stands above a facilitating law. But in Sri Lanka, sometimes the facilitators are given undue legal advantages over the regulators, as the hub operation regulations show, and the GCEC Amendment Act also has been misinterpreted by certain parties. So my point again is that I agree that there is a serious law and order breakdown in certain segments of this country, which has to be rectified in the general context, and with that only that we can see that these things are also rectified in a satisfactory manner. Now this is only one issue, but I am very thankful about the media for highlighting this issue. Otherwise, it would have been just forgotten within another week or 2. If not, it has been highlighted by the media. So that is the crux of the problem. When there is a national issue like this, some other issue may suddenly come up, like a presidential candidate, and it will obliterate the real issues. So we have to keep these things in focus, and my point is threefold. First of all, there should be a comprehensive inquiry into this by the authorities, and all the people who are responsible should be taken to task. Whether they are government officers acting in connivance, whether they are private companies, or whether the officers who had been negligent in not looking at their legal responsibilities and obligations. There are provisions in the penal code like section 298 where a negligent official can be even taken to task by a court action. So there are probabilities and possibilities which have to be explored. Second is, we have to look at all these laws in a comprehensive manner, in a holistic manner, to see where there are possibilities of this kind of things happening in the future, And the third is to give more power to the regulators and see whether we can or we should take away some of the powers that had been fettered with the facilitators. Because my personal opinion here, all this time I was just making my observations from the legal context. My personal opinion is the opinion of the customs that Sri Lanka is not the garbage dump of any developed country, and we should stand firm and strong. And investment promotion is not bringing in garbage. It is bringing in raw material and making some value added product and sending it off. But not to bring in things for the sake of bringing in things, not to have investors for the sake of investors, not to give them tax concessions and other concessions in order to make their profit level go up and the living standard of this country and the environment of this country to go down. That's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Gunawardena. With that, we have to go into another commercial break. Investment promotion is not bringing in garbage, is Mr. Gunawardena's personal opinion, and that has been the case Mr. Gunawardena is trying to raise. With that, we go into a short commercial break. When we come back, the final round of Face the Nation. Welcome back. You're watching Face the Nation. We are in discussion regarding the waste containers found in the Colombo port and the Katunayaka Free Trade Zone. We spoke for 3 rounds now with our eminent panelists who have expressed various views regarding this problem. This is the final round, and I'm going to draw the attention to each panelist to deliver their concluding remarks on this particular topic. I'm going to start off with Mr. Eranda Ginige once again. Mr. Ginige, you've heard what has been said on your left and on your right. Sad situation in our country, but this may be seen as the tip of the iceberg, because the problem extends way bigger than we can see it right now. As you said, there could be other containers coming in. The garbage that has not been sent out, as Mr. Samsudeen mentioned, after this recycling process takes place, could have ended up in places like Mitotapulla and Aruakkalu. A lot of questions arises with regard to this current situation. You are a person, I'm going to mention this again, who speaks of our country in international forums, who takes the brand name of Sri Lanka, who tries to take it out to the world. Now we are at a situation where legal gazettes, laws, statements by ministers, all sorts of things have created what you call an acharua. Now, what are we going to do? Are we going to look back and repeal what has been done by Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa when he was finance minister? Or are we going to issue a new one under Minister Mangala Samaraweera? Or are we going to completely forget this and just tackle this garbage issue? What is going to happen, Mr. Ginige, as a citizen of our country?
Well, I think, we should not be all, doom and gloom, because then we can't solve the problem. So we need to solve the problem. Like Mr. Gunawardena said, the 2013 Gazette Chaturanga is not to import garbage or waste. 2013 Gazette is to import raw material, add value and then re-export, right? And these guys have gone on and imported this kind of waste material. So they have abused the provisions, and I think it can be improved. Now, one thing that was not mentioned here, Chaturanga, is the health. The health factor. We spoke about environment, but what about the health of human health, right? Now, if these are, as it is claimed that these are clinical waste, and also if these mattresses are coming from hospitals, because my Bachelor of Science is in genetics and microbiology, I can, with command, I can talk about how germs can spread through this material. Spores and microorganisms and infectious organisms can very well survive in this physical material, and with the right temperature and conditions, they can once again spread. So there's a huge health, human health issue also in this whole problem. Now, as a solution, Chaturanga, what I'm proposing is, this Basel Convention is rather weak, and it is known that the world over people say that it is weak. So they are now coming up with internal processes, right? I think it is now time that the corporate sector, now come on, you are the corporate leaders, you are the professionals. It is your responsibility not to wait until the government or Basel Convention or whatever and come and tell you what to do. You have to now come out, even the chambers must come out now. You have to take a step and make the laws for yourself. you need to come up with your own policies and regulations and try to control and manage this situation, because this is not going to be sustainable for us. I think that could be one pragmatic start. Expecting everything to come from our politicians and people's representatives. I don't think anybody is bothered about this, as Azra said, that everybody is now interested in campaigns. I think it is the private sector who has first of all caused this, should also take the responsibility to solve this.
Thank you, Mr. Ginige. I'm going to very quickly move to Mr. Jayavira. We also have the political involvement. We touched on this on our third round as well. Every issue in our country, be it from the central bank bond scam to the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement to the Central Expressway, name any controversial topic that has been taken up in the media, obviously there is a very strong political involvement behind it as well. Here too, we see two key political names being mentioned and others also being involved in this. Now, from what we are aware and from what the media has found out, there has been suppression towards the investigating authorities as well. Mr. Jayavira, again, as a citizen of our country, with everything that is coming out, this is probably one of the very rare occasions that at least one state institution has done their job, to what we can see, at least from what is available. When at least one person is trying to do the correct thing, again, pulled back from the leg. What do you think?
Well, that is the true story of Sri Lankan mentality. But let me start with a different point of view. We, in 2015, when this government came into power, tried to implement the SEPA, we got together with UPM and then we produced the document for international trade, how to develop the Sri Lankan legal system. Now that particular document has become a base document for EU and ITC experts in this country. Likewise, now we are trying to develop the National Trade Policy Enactment and International Agreement Ratification Act with the Professional National Front. We, as you propose, we being private citizens, we are doing it. We can push up to certain extent. This country has become so politically oriented purely because our system does not allow professionals and technical experts to run the country. Each and every decision is geared to a political decision. Now we have to stop. What I openly quote in everywhere is, if you can remember, Indian Prime Minister came to this country and said, Sri Lankans can go to India on visa on arrival. Have you ever found one single person who has gone to India on visa on arrival? No. Though he said like this, when he goes back to India, their bureaucrat says, sir, you can say anything, but cannot be implemented. That is the policy of Indian national policy. Now, is it the way that Sri Lankan works? If our minister or whoever the political leader decides that all the government structure should adhere to those conditions, we have to stop this. The government is there only for a term of 5 years or whatever the period as per the constitution. But the country and the national policies is forever. It should have the necessary way to develop it or amend it and change it. But that cannot be on the political cycles. It should be a national procedure. So we are trying to come and develop that, where we believe, yes, we can have the policies, political you can change up to a certain extent, but cannot override or completely go on the reverse end. So that is our position in terms of the present day problem as well. That's why I say even this is a good opportunity for us to think twice and proceed future. Thereby, we can eliminate all the next set of possibilities that can take place in another few years' time or even tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Jayavira. With that, I want to again move into Mr. Gunawardena and ask this question in the final round. The laws are available. The laws have not been adhered to. The customs have launched an investigation. Several international bodies, as per what we've heard from the United Kingdom, have also launched an investigation. We have seen in the past where information exchange amongst bodies, government bodies is concerned, some information is not provided accurately to the other information, other state sector institution. Now, if there's an international body also involved, the investigation process, in your opinion, with your experience, how long will it take? And until that, how long will this garbage be in our country?
The investigation process has to take its own time. We cannot hurry it up lest some of the evidence will go missing or not taken into account. So, an investigation, I can't give a time frame for an investigation, but we can always say that sooner is the better. But my personal opinion is that there should be a deep and comprehensive investigation into this whole thing, and to see how the laws had been twisted and turned to accommodate certain corrupt methodologies and corrupt practices to become mainstream in the country. And there we can be the starting point. Punishing the culprits and letting the system prevail as it is not the solution. We have to find out the gaps and the contradictions and find some way of solving them. I am always optimistic about the future of the country, and that's why we are still fighting in this front despite all these odds against us. The moment we lose that expectation of a bright future, we will also stop fighting. So, my personal view is that we have to strive for something better for the sake of the next generation. And here what we have seen is that first of all, we have to find that the rule of law prevails in this country, and the regulators should be given more powers, as I mentioned before. And the third is a very salient point which has been mentioned by Mr. Ginnigan. I am grateful for him for that. That is, whatever the international conventions say, we have to go beyond it for the sake of the country. This is the same when it comes to Basel or Rotterdam or to the Biological Diversity Convention or the CITES. Now, there are certain issues where we have to take a national stand. We have to, of course, adhere by the international obligations, but that does not mean that if there is a contradiction between the international agreements and the domestic law, we have to be strong in having a stronger domestic law to meet our national needs. And sometimes it may not make some of the international secretariats very happy about our situation, but nevertheless we have to take a stand. So, even though the Basel Convention may allow certain waste material to be exported to other countries as it is seen in the convention, and I agree with him that it is a weak convention. Yes, all conventions are weak and they are tilted towards developed countries. We have to be mindful of it. That is what we call the golden rule. Those who have the gold make the rules. So, when it comes to international conventions, that golden rule is always there. But we have to take a stand as a nation, and we have to take a firm stand that this small country cannot accept waste from other countries. And what we generate as waste has to be taken into account and disposed in a manner that does not become hazardous to the country and the human beings. And all environmental issues end up as health issues. That is a point that all citizens of this country, regardless of their positions, should take into account, that whatever the lapses that they allow will haunt them in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunawardena. Finally, to Mr. Ashraf Samsudeen, the Superintendent of the Sri Lanka Customs. Firstly, before we conclude, I have to say thank you very much for agreeing to be a part of this tonight's show on Face the Nation. Mr. Samsudeen, before we go, as the final speaker of tonight's program, I want to ask you this question. There is an investigation now. There is a Court of Appeal case going on with regard to this issue as well. The customs initially told the media and informed the general public about this issue once it was found out. Now, in your opinion, what will be done and what will be the outcome?
No, well, you have pointed out a very important matter in previous question, that how far our investigation will go for with this waste material which are lying in our land.
Yeah.
So, I think we should take an immediate action to send back this cargo to that particular destination. Under Basel Convention, it was not informed to Sri Lanka before they send the cargo to here. That's first violation. that has to be taken in a high level. But for us, the investigation is sufficient enough to move for a customs inquiry. Most probably within a very few days we can go for a customs inquiry and we can penalize the persons and we can come to a conclusion. But there's another authority is there, that is Central Environment Authority. They are the expert on this relevant matter. We need their opinion. They have to come out with some solution. But I would like to say something. In Central Environment Authority, in their regulation, all the waste under their solid waste management policy, importation of post-consumer waste are prohibited. That is their opinion, and we have that opinion in writing. As well, there are a number of laws in Sri Lanka. You know, in transshipment, normally customs have no control when the cargo is going through Sri Lanka. But if any hazardous waste are going through Sri Lanka, it should be informed to customs or they informed to the relevant competent authority before it comes through Sri Lanka. Even the transshipment gazette notification, we have a strong point here. Goods which are prohibited, restricted and contraband of all description or any form of weapons of mass destruction or any dangerous or other good that pose or likely to pose a threat to either human, plant or animal life or the environment or any other goods which in the opinion of the Director General of Custom is incriminatory shall be seized and forfeited. Even the transshipment goods which are not meant for Sri Lanka. We have that power. So the power is there, the law is there, but the thing is we have to implement. Certain laws are superseding all these things. So we have to cover up all these matters. My final thing is we want to make this land a better place to live for you, me and to the entire human beings. As a citizen, we have obligation. As a business person, we have obligation. As a government servant, we have obligation. And the media, you are playing a wonderful job. You are the people, you are the, especially we say, Mura Devatao of this country. You go ahead with this one and support the environmentalists and protect our country from all these alien waste into this country. So there should be a joint operation fighting against this dumping of waste.
Thank you, Mr. Samsudeen, for your views as well. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming here and talking to us on this very controversial topic that has taken up a lot of space on social media as well as mainstream electronic and print media as well. Mr. Nalaka Jayavira, who is a civil activist, for joining us this evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Jayavira. Mr. Eranda Ginige, thank you very much for joining us and talking to us. Mr. Ashraf Samsudeen, Superintendent of the Sri Lanka Customs, thank you very much for coming and talking to us. And finally, Mr. Gunawardena, thank you very much for coming today and talking to us about this. Azra, Shalan, thank you to you all as well for setting time off your schedules to be a part of Face the Nation this evening. That's all we have for you, but before we go, as Shamir usually does, he ends the program with a quote. But I'm going to quote Mr. Gunawardena here and say, as he said, the golden rule is the person with the gold makes the rules. Mahinda Rajapaksa made a rule in 2013 as the finance minister. This is where we are right now, and we are yet to see whether the current finance minister will do something about it or whether the proper legal channels will do their proper jobs and we will find an end to this current garbage problem that we are seeing on media, and international attention has also been drawn. That's all we have for you from Face the Nation this evening. We'll be here same time, same place next week as well with an interesting topic like we discussed today. Thank you very much for watching.